Hi guys, it's Steffi from the Novelty Corner and welcome back to my channel and welcome to my Marvel Cinematic Universe Phase 2 discussion video. So if you missed my first video, which I will leave linked above, I am just sort of sharing some thoughts and opinions I have on the different Marvel Cinematic Universe films in chronological order in the phase groups that the film studio have released them in. Phase 2 films include Iron Man 3, Thor 2, Captain America the Winter Soldier, Guardians of the Galaxy, Avengers 2 Age of Ultron, and Ant-Man. I'm going to say right off the bat that my favourite film of all of the Marvel Cinematic Universe films is Captain America the Winter Soldier, and I'll talk more about that later on, but it is my absolute favourite, plus probably one of my favourite films of all time. It's definitely up there with a couple of films that I just absolutely adore. So starting with Iron Man 3, I think we really see Tony Stark at a really low point because after Iron Man 2 and the Avengers, he's really suffering from quite a bit of PTSD. I mean, he saved the world by flying a nuclear warhead up into space and blowing up aliens and nearly getting locked out of Earth himself and dying. So there's a bit of stress going on there and he's really not coping very well. It affects his relationship with Pepper, it affects his ability to sleep, and he's building Iron Man suits left, right and center because he just doesn't know what else to do with himself. And this is where in the first video I talked about how I think Tony is a character that reacts. And it's actually the same as Captain America. I think Captain America reacts as well. But I think the real difference between the two of them is the ability to see beyond the short term. Tony reacts in the moment and tries to deal with what's going on right in that second. That's all he's trying to do. He's just trying to get through one day at a time. He's not actually looking at long-term solutions yet because he doesn't really know how to do that, which is really interesting to know from a character perspective, because as an audience member, because that's his journey. That's what he needs to be able to do. And at the moment, he is just obsessed with his work again, because he's a workaholic. We knew that, and we know that from the original films. What's really cool is Pepper takes more of a stance in this film. So she's an equally strong character, even though she's more heavily involved in the action and the plot this time. I mean, when she ends up in the Iron Man suit the first time, that is incredible. I absolutely loved that. I thought that was fantastic. But then you see her being exposed to extremis, which has really, really dire consequences. And you realize just how strong this woman is, that she deals with all of this crap and just gets on with her day. I think it was also interesting having an antagonist who is from Tony's past, who Tony is indirectly responsible for. I mean, that's really the story of Tony Stark's life in these films, is that he does something without meaning to and causes a reaction that comes back to bite him in the butt later on. So it's really sort of seeding that idea, and probably why he reacts the way that he does is he suddenly realizes he's caused a problem, even if it's without meaning to, and he has to fix it, as opposed to going, well, actually, maybe we might need to approach this in a different way. Yeah, I think that's really interesting. I did really like the scenes between Tony and Rhodey in this film because I think they just have this really great brother relationship, and it was nice to see more of that. It was also really awesome at the end when you have the, I think was it the house party, where all the Iron Man suits come out and are fighting. I thought that was really cool, and I liked seeing all the different versions of the Iron Man suit for different purposes. That was really cool. The symbolic gesture that he makes for Pepper at the end about starting fresh, I think was really poignant, and regardless of whether or not that actually has an impact, lasting impact on the future of the character, I think it was just really a nice way to end the film and to see him take a step forward and realize, okay, he needs a bit of help. Thor 2 was an interesting film. I think it was one of those films where I went from actually really enjoying the character of Jane to actually really despising her. I don't like Jane as a character now, so I don't know what happened in that film. I think she became very damsel in distress. I don't know, just in general, and I didn't quite like that because she was such a strong character in the first one and so interested in what was going on, whereas this time it was just like she was fawning over Thor. And I mean, okay, I know it's Thor and it's Chris Hemsworth and he's gorgeous to look at, but yeah, I didn't get it, and I thought that diminished the storyline a little bit. What I did really like was the interactions between Thor and Loki. Loki's obviously in prison on Asgard now because of his actions in Avengers, and it was just interesting seeing him, how they interact and react, especially following the death of their mother. Sort of this uneasy truce that comes about. And I mean, my favorite scene in the entire film is the scene where they're walking from the prison to the Dark Elf ship that they're about to steal, and they're talking, and Loki keeps turning into other characters and continuing the conversation and basically pissing Thor off. And then as they're leaving, they interact with all of the other characters who all threaten Loki, and it's just this wonderfully understated, humorous scene that I adore, and it's the one thing I look forward to when I watch the film. I don't think I liked Thor 2 as much as I enjoyed the first one. I mean, there are some really cool elements, and I think this one has dated a little bit better than the first one, but I don't think that the story was as strong as such. And yeah, I don't know. I don't really know how to say except that it wasn't my favorite, and I don't know. There were still some cool moments in it though. I should say none of this is actually negative. I really love all of these films to death, and I would watch any of them anytime, but some of them I love more than others. Speaking of love, we come to my favorite film, Captain America: The Winter Soldier. This film is gold. It's like someone took the Die Hard and the Bourne films and just smushed them together and added in a couple of comic book characters. It is so good. The story in this one, the reason I love this one so much is I actually think the story is the strongest of any of the films, because it is really the story of Steve not only coming to grips with the time that he currently lives in now. So he's sort of been thrown into it in Avengers, and now it's the time where he actually has to go, okay, where do I stand? And how do I feel about the people that I work for now? And how do I build up a network of friends and allies? I loved that they had Natasha in this film because I think it really highlighted their relationship. And it is really this really sweet brother-sister relationship where she doesn't mind pulling him back into line, and he almost helps her to regain some of that, the human level stuff that she has sort of been missing in previous years, because he is so good and she is at that point where she knows that her history is not great, and she's trying to find a way to reconcile that and to try and be a better person. And I think they help each other out with that, and I absolutely love that. And I loved the introduction of Sam Wilson. I think his relationship with Steve is great. I loved the comedic element that they have together, just the very real and natural sort of friendship stuff that they've got going on. And then you throw into the mix the Winter Soldier and how Steve deals with finding out that that's Bucky, and he doesn't remember Steve, and there's that real tension because suddenly they've got an enemy, but the enemy is a friend, and Steve is really torn between that. And I think that's what gives the film the emotional punch that it has. The storytelling, the action sequences, all of it is so tightly done and so well shot that it is just a really wonderful film to watch. And if you asked me to pick any film to watch over and over again, it would be The Winter Soldier, because I think it's just so well done. I could wax lyrical about how much I like it, but I'll stop here because otherwise it'll just devolve into me going, just watch it, it's really, really fantastic. But it is honestly the film that I would recommend to anyone. If you're not going to watch any other films in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, or you want to get a taste of what it can be, what it is at the top level, then watch this film. Then there's Guardians of the Galaxy, which was sort of like the same thing that Thor did, where it was a departure from reality. This is now a departure from the reality that we have come to know. And so we go far away from Earth and we're in the middle of space, and you've got weird, wacky characters, aliens, humans, you name it, you've got them all. Everything looks different. Nothing is familiar, and yet all of it is, because all of the characters and the problems that they face are the same. It's just set somewhere completely fantastical. So what did I like? I liked all the new characters. I liked the humor in this one. This one is obviously the funniest one so far, and it has the best soundtrack, and it has Groot. And Groot is my favorite, and we will not be departing from that. I just think he was really, really cool, going from what he is at the start to what he is at the end, and then going into Guardians of the Galaxy 2 later on. I love the character of Groot because it's so simple, and yet it's not. And I think Guardians of the Galaxy is all about finding family and understanding and relate. It's sort of like the first Avengers film, except this is a group of total misfits who have really no clue what they're doing, except they're all trying to do something for themselves, and yet they're trying to band together and try and do something for the greater good, and they don't really know how to do it because they're usually just in it for their personal gain. I like that there was still a mystery at the end. So we know that Peter doesn't know who his family, who his father is, but we don't find that out at the end. That's something that's still there that we can come back and revisit later on. For the moment, it's all about, okay, can we get this group of difficult to manage individuals to work together to try and prevent someone from destroying an entire planet? And that was really cool. And then we come to Avengers 2, Age of Ultron, and this is where I talked about before how Tony seems to cause a lot of problems without meaning to. Yeah, he's back at it again. I loved how it opened with the Avengers out in the field working together, and I think it shows how far they've come from the first film to the second one. And it's not trying to say they've stuck together this whole time. It's just, okay, we've got a problem and now we need to solve it. And they're working together to try and solve the current problem, which is trying to track down Loki's scepter and the power that it contains. Their relationship with one another has matured a little bit, but there are still moments where they just can't help themselves. I love the party that Tony throws at his tower in the first part of the film, where they're all sitting down, they're all chatting, and there's a whole lot of guests, but then all the guests go home and they're sitting around, they're friends, and they have the scene where they're all trying to pull up Thor's hammer off the table. I don't know, does anyone else think that Steve was not trying very hard because he almost lifted it? But I mean, that whole scene is really significant towards the end of the film when Vision picks up the hammer without even trying, and it's to point out that Vision is trustworthy, and that's, you know, that's a technique that they used to highlight and to prove to the audience that Vision is not a bad guy. From a character perspective, that was really lovely to see them all just relaxed. And of course, you then have the reveal of Ultron stumbling into that really relaxed scene and basically throwing it completely off kilter, and then reigniting all of those issues that people had with one another to begin with. Like Steve being really skeptical of Tony because Tony just goes and does things without thinking and thinking that he's doing the right thing without actually considering, okay, what could the larger implications be? Tony not understanding why it's a problem because he was trying to do something for the good of the planet. He was trying to keep everyone safe. And you can see both perspectives, and yet you can see why there is so much tension between the two characters. The introduction of the twins was really cool. I mean, I love Wanda. I think she is incredible, and I liked the interplay between the twins and Hawkeye. That then highlighted the fact that in the MCU, they've given Hawkeye this family that no one except Natasha and Nick Fury knew about, and he's a family guy, and he's got a wife at home who's about to have a baby, and he's got 2 young kids, and that's where he goes when he's not avenging or out in the field. And then he sees these 2 kids, and he calls them punk kids in the film, and when it comes down to it in the final sequence in Sokovia, you see him try and take Wanda under his wing and try and make sure that she's safe, and that if she's not going to fight, then she's not going to be in the firing line either. And I thought that was a really fascinating character arc for Hawkeye to have, and that comes into play again later when we come to Civil War in Phase 3. So it was just really cool. And just as an aside, Ashley Olsen and Jeremy Renner were also in Wind River, which is incredible, and I really wanted to see that because of the way that they interacted on screen in Avengers 2. So if you haven't seen Wind River, that's really good. Complete aside. I mean, Avengers 2 is a huge film. There's so much going on. There are so many sequences that are really, really cool. Introduce the Vision, you've got Wanda, you've got, a city being lifted off the ground, mass destruction on a really huge scale. And it calls into question this whole idea of, okay, well, what's the collateral damage of all these big guns basically going out to protect the Earth, but there's always consequences. And that gets addressed more in Civil War in a really natural way, I think. And now there's Ant-Man, which I'll admit I've seen that probably the least, with the exception of one other film, because I don't know, for some reason at the moment, like when it came out, it sat outside of what was currently known. So it was the introduction of a brand new character with very little input from the other films. So where you slipped in Black Widow into Iron Man 2, when you slipped in Hawkeye into Thor, there was sort of no lead in for Ant-Man. But I think in a way, having watched it now 2 or 3 times, I like it every time I like it more every time I watch it. I like that it's a brand new character. So the Ant-Man suit has been around for ages and it's been shelved. And yet a new character comes in, and it's not a character with a squeaky clean past. It's not someone who's got a lot of money, who's got a lot of political influence. It's not someone who is in the public eye. It's someone who's been in prison and he's trying to do the right thing by his daughter, who he doesn't get to see, and yet he can't hold down a job because no one will hire him. And he needs money and he needs a place to stay so that he can have visitation with his daughter, and so he ends up going back to committing a crime and yet finds himself being recruited by Hank Pym to become the new Ant-Man and to help him stop, something really terrible happening. And I think that was a really interesting story, and Paul Rudd does such a great job. I'm not a huge Paul Rudd fan, but I really liked him in this. Like I said, the more I watch this film, the more I like it, and I like the training sequence, and I love the scale. The way that they do the scale of stuff is really cool, and I think that's what's really unique about Ant-Man compared to the others, is that you're not looking at these massive big things. I mean, it has its moments, but you're really looking at, okay, what's a small change that you can make that can have a huge impact? And as a metaphor, that's really powerful. So that's my thoughts on phase 2. I'm sure there's plenty of things that I could have said that I haven't, but let's just talk about things. In the comments, let me know which is your favorite phase 2 film, or your favorite film from the MCU in general. I don't mind, let me know. I will probably film my thoughts on phase 3 after I have seen Infinity War. I don't know when that's going to be because it's a bit crazy at the moment, but I will hopefully be seeing that really soon, and I will then film thoughts on those films because I have many. I hope that wherever you are in the world, you're having a wonderful day, and I'll catch you guys in my next video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye guys.